character, of course, unless it's your goal to wake up, in which case the dream character must be ruthlessly annihilated. If your desire is to experience transcendental bliss, or supreme love, or altered states of consciousness, or awaken kundalini, or to qualify for heaven, or to liberate all sentient beings, or simply to become the best dang person you can be, then rejoice, you're in the right place, the dream state, the dualistic universe. However, if your interest is to cut the crap and figure out what's true, then you're in the wrong place. And you've got a very messy fight ahead, and there's no point in pretending otherwise. That earlier paragraph, the one with Buddha's head and me screaming at students that they should be dead and all that, that's not why I think I wouldn't make a good Zen master. In fact, that's why I think I'd make a really cool Zen master. The bad part would stem from what I suspect would prove to be poor student retention. As it happens, I'm a very nice guy with an easygoing teaching style and laudable student retention, and if I had a banner or emblem, it would probably be a minimalist version of the Fool card in Tarot, the Fool striding blissfully off the cliff and into the void. As a Zen master, my job would be to infuse in students total knowledge of the Absolute. That may sound like a tall order until you stop to consider the fact that it doesn't require knowledge to be enlightened any more than it requires knowledge to obey the law of gravity or to be bathed in sunlight. Since enlightenment is nothing more than truth realization, it doesn't take much to figure out that if anything requires knowledge and effort and seemingly superhuman powers of imagination, it's not truth, but delusion. And if anything is so wildly improbable as to defy belief, it's not the vast ocean or the billions of fish in it, but the inability of those fish to locate water. I hear a sniffle. Marla feels rebuked. The master has diminished her offering. That's how she should feel. Those Zen students aren't getting the giggles when the stick comes down. Why do you think I'm telling you this, Marla? I don't know. So I can transcend the common, so I can move past, so I can... We're talking about two different things here, Marla, okay? You think I'm telling you that the insights you've had in meditation are Meikyo, right? She looks at me and nods. No, not at all. This is an important distinction. I'm saying that the insights you've had are Meikyo in the context of waking up. See, unlike me, the Zen master knows exactly why his students are there. He doesn't have to ask. But it's not like that here. So I'm asking you now, what is your desire? She starts to say something, but I cut her off. The universe will give you whatever you want, Marla. That's how it works. Even if you don't know it, it can't be otherwise. You don't have to be worthy, but you do have to know what it is you want. You have to focus. Try to do that. Try writing out what it is you want and condensing it down until you've reduced it to a concise statement of desire or intent. Your path can only be meandering and your life a blur until you do that. Come talk to me when you have something, okay? She nods. And Marla, I think being a good mom for that little girl would be a perfectly good answer. She nods and smiles and hugs me. She gets it. I'm sure it hurts to have the master say that her profoundly moving insights are shit. But she gets it. That's good. Chapter 8. I don't do heart. The most useful piece of learning for the uses of life is to unlearn what is untrue. Antisthenes. My monologues tend to be a little loose, but they could easily be a lot looser. It takes a conscious effort on my part to stay on track and not follow every tempting digression. I like to follow the course dictated by my initial impression of what a student needs to hear, and I usually end by putting the ball in their court. I can say it, and they can nod and agree, but that doesn't do any good at all. If you want to benefit from knowledge, you have to own it for yourself, and the only way to do that is to fight for it. Emerson said, "No man thoroughly understands a truth until he has contended against it." Having the answer isn't enough. You have to do the math. The chair Marla vacated does not stay empty for long. A 50-something engineer named Arthur appears and waits for permission to sit down, which I give with a slight gesture. That may seem overly formal, but for Arthur it's actually an improvement. The first time Arthur came to speak with me, he sat in a half-lotus at my feet, which made me a little buggy. After I coaxed him up into a chair, we spent an hour disabusing him of his tendency to equate enlightenment with divinity. It's still hardwired into his thinking that the teacher must be regarded as an elevated being, so he never sits without permission and always speaks with formality. Arthur doesn't live in the house, but he's a frequent visitor, especially in spring when the gardens need so much help. Arthur tells me he wants a technique. Rather, he wants the technique. I really only have one technique, and everybody who comes to the house soon learns what it is from other students. But, oddly, nobody seems to practice it until they receive it from me. I've laid it out many times and tried to put it in the public domain for the use of whoever wants it, but it has remained strangely proprietary, as if the only way it can work is if it comes directly from me. There's really not much to it, but I guess there's not much to closing your eyes and repeating a mantra or counting your breaths either. "Okay, Arthur," I begin. "The technique is called spiritual autolysis. Autolysis means self-digestion, and spiritual means, hell, I don't really know. Let's say it means that level of self which encompasses the mental, physical, and emotional aspects. Put the two words together, and you have a process through which you feed yourself, one piece at a time, into the purifying digestive fires." "May I ask a question?" Arthur asks. "Yes, Arthur." "You make spiritual autolysis sound rather unpleasant." "Yes, Arthur, it's an unpleasant process." "Oh, I see. Thank you." "You're welcome. The process of spiritual autolysis is basically like a Zen koan on steroids. All you really have to do is write the truth." Write the truth? Sounds simple, doesn't it? Yes, that's all there is to it. Just write down what you know is true, or what you think is true, and keep writing until you've come up with something that is true. "There are 360 degrees in a circle," says Arthur. "Sure," I agree. "Start with something as seemingly indisputable as that, and then start examining the foundation upon which that statement is built, and just keep following it down until you've reached bedrock, something solid, true." "There aren't 360 degrees in a circle?" he asks. The question presupposes that there's a circle. There's not a circle? Maybe. I don't know. Is there? Well, if I draw a circle, I. When did you confirm the existence of an I? Draw. Have you already raced past the part where you confirmed that you are a separate physical being in a physical universe with the ability to perceive, to draw? Have you already confirmed duality as truth? Arthur is thoughtful and silent for several moments. I guess that's what you mean by following it down. This is very confusing. I don't even know where to start. It doesn't matter where you start. You could start by using Ramana Maharishi's query, "Who am I?" or "What is me?" and then just work at it. Just try to say something true and keep at it until you do. Write and rewrite. Make it cleaner and cut out the excess and ego and follow it wherever it leads until you're done. And how long does that usually take? I would think a couple of years, but when you're done, you're done. And by done you mean done. Oh, is this like journaling? Like keeping a diary? Ah, good question. No. This isn't about personal awareness or self-exploration. It's not about feelings or insights. It's not about personal or spiritual evolution. This is about what you know for sure, about what you are sure you know is true, about what you are that is true. With this process, you tear away layer after layer of untruth masquerading as truth. Anytime you go back to read something you wrote, even if it was only yesterday, you should be surprised by how far you've come since then. It's actually a painful and vicious process, somewhat akin to self-mutilation. It creates wounds that will never heal and burns bridges that can never be rebuilt. And the only real reason to do it is because you can no longer stand not to. He lets that sink in for a few moments. What's the reason for writing it down? Why not just do it in your head like with koans? That's another good question. Yes, koans and mantras are done in your head. Ramana Maharishi's "Who am I?" query is done in your head. The reason for writing it down on paper or on a computer where you can see it is because the brain, unlikely as it may sound, is no place for serious thinking. Anytime you have serious thinking to do, the first step is to get the whole shooting match out of your head and set it up someplace where you can walk around it and see it from all sides. Attack, switch sides, and counterattack. You can't do that while it's still in your head. Writing it out allows you to act as your own teacher, your own critic, your own opponent. By externalizing your thoughts, you can become your own guru, judging yourself, giving feedback, providing a more objective and elevated perspective. Arthur is looking at me questioningly, so I continue. You're an engineer, right? Yes. And you engineer what? Bridges. In your head? Arthur pauses a moment to consider. Yes and no, he says. Okay, you're saying yes because there's a process of conceptualization, right? The idea stage? There is, yes. And other internal creative and problem-solving stages along the way? Yes. And then what? What's after the initial conceptualization? Well, then there are the meetings and preliminary drawings and more meetings and the project managers. The creative process at work. Well, yes. So basically, it starts as an idea, a thought in someone's head, and ends up as a real bridge somewhere in the real world. Yes. And along the way, it evolves, takes shape, comes into focus, right? It moves from idea to rough sketches to highly precise drawings and scale models to an actual bridge that will last 100 years. Something like that? Something like that, yes. And that's the creative process.